Hi, I'm Crystal.
And I'm Karin, and you're listening to the Rom-Com Detectives.
Welcome to Rom-Com Detectives, Episode 3, Far Worse Punishment, the next episode in our Mentalist unit. Today, Karin and I will be talking about the second episode of the first season called Red Hair and Silver Tape. This episode originally aired on September 30th, 2008, which was, wow, a long time ago. Couple of housekeeping things to go over really quick. While we had intended to alternate between units when we started, Tara had to travel, so Karin and I are going to be doing the first few episodes of The Mentalist until I can get together with Tara in a couple of weeks to record our first Lucifer episode. Another thing is our podcast website is now live at romcomdetectives.com. No hyphens or anything, just romcomdetectives.com, and you can follow us on Instagram at romcomdetectives. So, shall we get to our case briefing? This is going to change because when I was listening back to what we did for the first one, the case briefing is going to be like basic details of like the case and like the episode and stuff like that. So this one takes place in northern Napa County. And as I mentioned, it's called Red Hair and Silver Tape. And the title comes from the fact that the victim has red hair. And I guess they kind of look into the fact that they seem to like redheads as potential victims. And the girl was found bound with silver duct tape. So
they reached deep for that title.
And this was something that I guess I started noticing maybe around episode 3 or 4 because I like to look at episode titles. I don't know about you.
Yeah, they're so fun.
Yeah, and so after like I guess 3 or 4, I was like, oh, they're all red.
Just so interesting because it's not like they have the episode title broadcast.
Yeah.
When they air the episode, it's all behind the scenes.
Yeah. So the cause of death for this case was suffocation, but she also had stab wounds, and the motive was, I don't know, insanity. Couple insanity. What would you call that?
That's what Jane tells them their motive is, I think.
Yeah. But there were 3 pretty notable guest stars. First one was Xander Berkeley. I know him from 24 and Terminator 2 and then a bunch of other small roles. There's a very young Dylan Minnette from 13 Reasons Why. And there's Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family. Jane's skills in the episode. We had seen some of these before, I guess most notably the cold reading, but this episode we get to see him hypnotize somebody.
Yes, with a very enabling Cho.
He does some cold reading, and he does like a what would you call what he does with the staff at the restaurant? Because I don't know, sometimes he does a group reading where he looks at everybody and he tries to suss them out. But I think in this case, the guy fainted before he could read anything, right?
He was planting a suggestion,
Yeah.
I think, to try to get the guilty person to react. I also wondered, what do we call what he does at the end of the episode when he's at gunpoint and he's trying to deflect? And he's doing suggesting to them that they shouldn't be pointing a gun at.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess he's I mean he does the same thing in the pilot, right? He's basically
does.
stalling so that Wagner doesn't shoot him with a gun.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny that they do it two episodes in a row where he's got people pointing guns at him.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so let's break down the episode. We're going to do this a little bit more broadly than we did in the last episode because the pilot's kind of like meatier and there's a lot more to pick apart, I feel like, in a pilot. Although there is a lot to pick apart in this one, so.
I would say this is our first standard case to look at.
So it starts with Lisbon, Cho, and Jane showing up, I guess, at a vineyard.
Yeah, Napa Valley, so they're known for their grapes.
Yeah. But yeah, so they show up at the scene and they're met by Sheriff Thomas McAllister. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, it's him. And I think that was probably intentional, because he ends up being a red herring. He's not the killer, but I mean, when I first saw him, I was like, yeah, yeah, it's him.
That's interesting. They do play him as a red herring.
Yeah, but he thinks it's a drug addict from out of state, but Jane immediately disagrees and he says that the killer's local and that she was killed by mistake and blah blah blah, and this kind of irritates him, and this gives us like a really funny encounter between the two of them that I love, because he scoffs at Jane's confidence and he asks, "Who is this guy?" And he mocks him and asks if he's clairvoyant. And then Jane challenges him to rock, paper, scissors. It's a funny little interaction, right? Timed really nicely to it, too.
Yes, and Lisbon and Cho are just kind of watching like the sheriff has no chance.
And yeah, I mean, there's another Cho smile. I don't know if I said it last episode, but he smiles a lot more in season one than we see him later on.
Yeah,
So, as a side note, rock, paper, scissors in Hawaii is called Jankempo. I guess that comes from a Japanese word for it, but yeah. And actually, instead of 1, 2, 3, we say that. We say Jankempo.
nice.
But the game is basically the same. So, all right. So they go to the family's house to make the notification, and the part that I really liked here was that while Cho and Lisbon and McAllister are talking to the parents, Jane is inside. He's observing the victim Melanie's room, and he's talking to the brother Frankie. And the kid is immediately pretty set on revenge, which is interesting because that's what Jane is doing, right? He's on a revenge quest. So it's like he's seeing an early version of a young version of himself in this kid, right?
Yeah, it's fun to note how often this theme is explored from both sides.
Yeah.
Should we encourage revenge or not, or is it worth it? And it gets explored from many different angles throughout the show.
And it's pretty different too here because he's so young. He looks like he's what, like 13, maybe a little bit
Uh,
younger.
the script says he's 9 or 10.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
yeah, he's very young.
Yeah. So this part isn't very important for the case, but I did want to mention it because it's helping to set up the secondary romantic comedy like pairing in this show, Rigsby and Van Pelt. He's back at, I guess Lisbon left Rigsby and Van Pelt back at the office, and the both of them are just eager to like do something, and he's trying so hard not to look at her but failing miserably. He's not very subtle, is he?
No,
Which explains why Cho gives him so much crap later, because he just clearly wears it right on his face. He doesn't hide it at all very well. So, without spoiling, McAllister becomes important later on in the show. And I thought it was very interesting to watch this episode again and watch his interactions with the family, because he seems pretty legitimately sympathetic and nice to them. He's not portrayed like that as much later on, right? He's more, I don't know if it's just because years have gone by and he's worked a bit longer in the role or something, but he mentions that he was on a call at the same restaurant that Melanie worked at, which furthers the suspicion, right? Oh, he was there.
he was there.
It's him there. But in hindsight, this was all just meant to like, yeah, throw people off. But yeah, he was there, and he tells Lisbon that he noticed a black truck leaving too quickly at around quarter to midnight. And so this helps Lisbon start building a timeline. And then they question the people at the restaurant, and then while they're there talking to the restaurant owners, a girl named Raquel comes to work, and Jane recognizes her from the girl Melanie's pictures. And she's kind of aggressive. Yeah, she's very antagonistic.
She does not want to talk to the police.
Yeah. And then, so this was the hypnotism scene we were talking about earlier. Lisbon is trying to question her. She's going down kind of hard on her too, right? She's like
Yeah, she
threatening her
is.
with prison time.
Well, they can all tell that she's being aggressive for a reason. She must know something.
Yeah. But yeah, so Lisbon walks out, and then Jane tells Cho, oh, she has a super low threshold, and he wants him to just like give him a minute with her. And Cho is really against it. He tells him it's illegal and unprofessional, but then he agrees. And Jane had told him to just stand by the door and like pretend to make a phone call or something, but actually Cho just stands there and watches.
Yep.
But yeah, so Jane talks to her in a very soothing voice, and oh my god, I would have been hypnotized right there too. The way he talks is just so smooth, right? Must have been very fun for that actress to listen to him talk. Oh no, sorry, we need to do that take again. But yeah, so he taps her lightly on the knee, and I didn't know what that was when I first saw this episode, because I'm not very familiar with hypnotism other than, you know, the basics that you hear in like pop culture and stuff like that. But he taps her lightly on the knee, and that comes back later. She doesn't seem phased by it. She just shakes out of it, and she's just like, "Your friend is weird," and she leaves.
Yeah, so you're left wondering, what did he even do anything?
Yeah, and even he makes it seem like it didn't work.
Yeah.
He doesn't he say something to Cho about it worked on the chicken or something like that?
Something. Yeah, yeah, it's a really weird comment.
What chicken is he talking about?
No idea.
So next, they find a note that says "Sorry, Melanie's locker," and then Jane does that group thing that we were talking about, and one of the restaurant, I guess he's one of the cooks, and he faints. He's so scared by what Jane's saying that he just faints right there. And I love the little moment where Jane hands the note back to Lisbon and says, "Voila." And she just looks so irritated with him because, oh my god, once again, he's done his flashy little thing and come up with a suspect
Hmm.
for them to talk to.
The first voila.
So Lisbon starts writing out a timeline on a chalkboard at the sheriff's office, and that becomes important later because they're trying to figure out who had time to kill her because there was a very narrow window between when she clocked out and when she went missing. But then Van Pelt calls, and this is a little clash between Jane and Lisbon because Lisbon is the leader of the team, but Jane seems to run things on his own all the time, where he like bullies his way into giving people orders and things like that. And this was a good first example of that because, I mean, he kind of did it in the pilot, but it was a little more subtle. He was more manipulative. And this one, he's just outright telling Grace to do something, and Lisbon's like, "No, don't do that. Do this instead."
Yeah, he clearly has his own ideas, and he and Lisbon clash about which route they should follow.
Yeah. So he tells Grace to call all the motels within 10 miles and look for a cash booking on the night of the murder. That didn't show up because I guess he thinks that this is the kill room or whatever.
Yeah, they find another case where someone was abducted and was
Yeah.
found bound in duct tape.
But she was alive, so and nothing happened to her.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So Jane immediately goes to, it's the same perpetrator, and they're just building confidence.
Yeah, and she was also a redhead, so.
Yes.
But Lisbon wants to focus on the black truck that McAllister had mentioned. And so she tells Grace to check into that. And then that's when Raquel comes back in, I guess, for additional questioning. And she's again very irritable and annoyed that she has to be there. But then Jane taps her on the shoulder, and suddenly she starts spilling everything about Melanie's secret boyfriend, Hector. And Lisbon, she knows, right?
Yes, immediately. Jane did something.
Well, plus he's not really. He's sitting over there, and he's looking like, "I didn't do anything."
He tries to deny it.
Yeah. So outside, she tells him it's illegal and unprofessional, and Cho's like, "That's what I said."
And Jane's like, yeah, Jane's like, I was going to say you had nothing to do with it, but okay, if you want to take credit, sure.
So that's when Lisbon brings Rigsby and Van Pelt in because they need to go serve a hot warrant. And I looked it up, and a hot warrant is apparently a term that they use when they're in hot pursuit of a suspect. So I guess it's time sensitive, and they need to go in and get him right now, kind of thing. As we see when they get to Hector's house, because there's
Yeah.
loud music playing inside, and they're all got their guns out, and they're wearing vests and everything.
And they got a SWAT team in on it.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
pull that together very quickly.
yeah. But then they do catch him after Lisbon tackles him right in the street, right as he's sprinting toward Jane.
Okay, but what's with the machete?
I don't know.
This guy, he's running down the street with a machete.
Plus, he had just jumped out of a window. Did he jump out of the window with the machete? That's kind of stupid and dangerous, right? Kids, don't ever jump out of a window with a machete. Just some advice from your rom-com detective. That's not a good idea. Yikes. Okay. So Lisbon, Jane, and McAllister, they're questioning Hector, and Jane says something interesting. He assures Hector that Lisbon understands the appeal of Hector. He says all women understand the charm of a violent man. Is he specifically talking
Oh,
about her, or is he talking about women in general?
I really think he's just trying to vibe with Hector, but yeah, that one just gives me the creeps. I found it very interesting though that McAllister, the sheriff, is here for all of this.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
comes along all the way through this episode, and Hector keeps looking over at him, and you kind of wonder, have they met before? Has he ever been
Mm.
on the sheriff's radar?
I mean, he must be if he's a drug dealer in the area, right? So they must
I
have
would
at least he must at least know who they must know who the other person is, right? So
So Hector really spins the love story that
yeah,
he really loved Melanie and that he would have no desire to kill her. Hurt her maybe, but not
yeah,
kill her.
yeah. So after this, Lisbon and Jane bicker a bit more about Hector because Jane thinks that he didn't do it, and Lisbon thinks that he did, and she says there's not always a hidden pattern, and that most of the time the obvious guy did it. And this is important because she points at her timeline on the chalkboard and insists there's no time and it had to be Hector. And he's staring at it and he admits that she was right and there was no time. But this is important because he seems to realize something here. You can see it on his face. But
Yeah,
he doesn't elaborate at this point because this is a thing for the show. They often keep what Jane is thinking hidden. Like you have to go back and try to figure out at what point he figured things out. But yeah, they keep things hidden from the viewer most of the time. So, but right after this, Jane notices the younger brother Frankie is at the front desk, and I don't know why he was there. I guess he had maybe heard that they took Hector into custody. But he takes him to a nearby restaurant, and he talks to Van Pelt, and he pretends that Lisbon wants her to check out the motel lead anyway. So he goes over her head, just like in the pilot episode we talked about. You talked about how he went over her head to get into the morgue to get put back on the case, even though he's on suspension, right? But he does it again, and he tells Van Pelt to call him first with the info so that Lisbon doesn't find out.
and he even says to Van Pelt, I've got Lisbon right here. You can ask her if she's
Yeah.
authorizing this.
And he winks at Frankie, right?
Yeah,
Like it's because the kid knows she's not here. So he's eating an ice cream cone, and this becomes a recurring theme with Jane too. He loves ice cream. We see him eating ice cream cones often. He asks Frankie what he plans to kill Hector with, and Frankie reveals a rusty axe in his backpack, which pretty ballsy for such a little kid. Like, jeez.
yes.
Jane tells him that he's not going to kill Melanie's killer, but he'll make him very sorry. And Frankie doesn't really seem to buy this. He's just like, that's not good enough, right?
So at this point, Jane opens up to Frankie and tells him about what happened to his wife and daughter and brings up the point that it's being truly sorry is a far worse punishment than dying.
Yeah.
Everybody dies.
So at this point, Van Pelt calls him back and she tells him about a motel that fit his search parameters. So he goes there by himself and he talks to the motel manager and he figures out by basically looking at things in the room that this is the place that the killer was going to be and that they're going to be coming back. So there's another victim that they need to worry about. And he goes back to the sheriff's office and he's really afraid. He seems really afraid that Lisbon's going to be really pissed at him for going behind his back again, which rightfully so, she probably would have been. But she is really happy. Like, I guess she just got off. Did she just get off the phone?
Yep, she just got some news, some forensics results, finding Melanie's blood in Hector's truck. So she is so excited. She thinks she has this thing closed.
Yeah, so her and Jane seem to be competing at this point to see who's right. Right? But then they go and talk to Hector, and he explains that he hit Melody because she was disrespectful and he gave her a bloody nose. But Lisbon wants to charge him anyway. And then she asked Jane what was his thing. And this is a scene that a lot of shippers, okay, let's get this out of the way. People don't like the term jizzbin because it sounds like the word jizz, right? But we're gonna have to, I think, get over it and just say jizzbin because it's so much easier than saying Jane and Lisbon, Jane and Lisbon, Jane and Lisbon all the time.
We can revolutionize the term. What name would you give just Jane and Lisbon?
We on Discord we were trying to come up with some alternate ones and they were all terrible.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, so this scene is one that a lot of people fixate on, a lot of shippers fixate on. He's trying to set up his little sting without his input, why I might add. Because he calls in Rigsby and Van Pelt for this.
He goes all in on this operation.
Yeah, so he makes a call to a restaurant. He says that he wants his reservation to be out on the terrace because it's more romantic. And then when he hangs up, he looks at her and he's like, "Don't fret, I wouldn't seduce you over a meal." And he says that would be very sophomoric. But the look on her face, right?
I didn't think you were trying to seduce me.
Yeah, but, so we're gonna have this clip up on our website. So if you want to go check that out, you can go watch it there. Very interesting interaction between them, and very early too for the brother sister crowd. But oh my god. So they go to the restaurant where Rigsby and Van Pelt are getting ready. Jane takes Lisbon to a motel room, and that's where she learns that he's set up this whole elaborate thing where Van Pelt and Rigsby are back in town. She's like got a camera feed on her, and they're gonna try to catch Melanie's killer. And at the restaurant, Rigsby groans as soon as he sees Van Pelt because she looks so hot. And to be fair, she does, right?
She does.
She
She's
looks
got her
really good.
low cut dress, and her corsage is hiding the
The
camera.
camera. But yeah, so she asks Rigsby if her wire is visible. He bends over to look closer, and you can see his eyes flick over to her boobs.
And of course, Jane and Lisbon have a front row seat.
I know. He's like grinning, like totally laughing about it, and she's pissed off at him already because, like I said, he set this whole thing up without talking to her.
So this is when Lisbon grabs the remote. It's like, if we're watching this, I'm in charge. We're going to do this professionally.
Yeah. But he tells her that he thinks that the killer is going to bring his victim back to the room and that they'll be waiting there for them. And she's very skeptical, but, and also, I mean, rightfully so, because he's basically saying that they're going to use Van Pelt as bait. And so that means that she's going to have to be kidnapped in his scenario, right? And that's kind of, do you think he told her that? Or if she was going to just meet somebody on the road and then they would catch them there? Because Jane seemed to think that they were going to get her back to the motel room, which is much further along than I would think that Van Pelt would have agreed to.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. Because when Van Pelt leaves, she does walk along the road, like she's giving them opportunity.
Yeah.
And Cho and Rigsby certainly are able to swoop in at that point. So
yeah. And it's obvious that Rigsby wouldn't have let it get to the motel point because he sees McAllister, right? And he like freaks out and he runs to her rescue. But we're skipping ahead. So Rigsby and Van Pelt are supposed to stage a fight. I thought this was really funny because he doesn't want to start their fight because he wants to eat his food.
I love that so much.
And
he doesn't expect to enjoy the food because it's some weird fusion, unknown concoction. And so when he tastes it, he's like, no, wait, I want to eat this.
Because he had just been talking about how he's like a cheeseburger kind of guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I thought this was funny because he says, this is actually quite good. It's just a salad, and all he's eaten at that point is a single tomato. That must have been some tomato.
They have really good tomatoes in Napa Valley.
Apparently. But holy cow. Grace gets it started by slapping him across the face. She hits him pretty hard.
Yeah, she does. She's all in.
But yeah, so she takes off down the road, walking, and a blue van passes them by, which is important later. Rigsby gets really nervous as they listen, and he takes off and he goes to save her because McAllister meets her on the road, and he's kind of pushy, right? He doesn't want to let her leave. And hello, dude, it's broad daylight.
I know, but some young ladies, just like you, have gone missing lately, and I need to make
Yeah,
sure you're
yeah.
safe. Come over to my squad car right now.
So going back to Rigsby, he takes off out of the van. He goes to save her. He pushes McAllister to the ground. Oh my god, they draw guns and everything.
Because at this point, McAllister doesn't know who Van Pelt and Rixby are. He's
Yeah,
only
yeah. He's never met them.
as soon as he sees Cho, he knows
Yeah,
immediately what's going on.
yeah.
And not that
He's pissed too.
he's so pissed.
Because, I mean, I guess from his perspective, he was just trying to, help some girl, and he just gets assaulted by some random guy charging out of nowhere. But yeah, so Lisbon is not amused by this because she knows that he could get in trouble. Because, I mean, he's the sheriff; he holds a position of power, so he can make a stink if he wants to. But she shuts off the TV, and that's when Jane tells her that he thinks it's the chef. But his reasoning is kind of ridiculous, right? He says he uses too much butter in his dishes and he's a gluttonous baby. And I think any of us would have been like, what the heck are you talking about, man? Too much
Hmm.
butter? And this goes back to earlier in the episode, Jane and Lisbon have been talking to the restaurant owners and he was eating their dishes and he was like, oh, this is really good. Oh, this is really good. And they talk about butter. And so that's where he got that from. But yeah, so Lisbon points out that Malcolm was in the kitchen, so he couldn't have done it. And he tries to tell her how, but she leaves in a huff. And so, what do you think he was going to tell her?
I think that he realized that the killer could have had a
An
helper,
accomplice.
an
Oh, okay.
accomplice, that maybe there's more than just one person orchestrating everything.
Yeah, so he stays in the room and he seems pretty bummed, I guess, because his little show has gone south. Nothing's happening how he wanted it to.
Yep.
And he was genuinely surprised when McAllister showed up on the road, right? Like he was just like, what is he doing there? Like what?
Yeah, everybody had like a jump scare moment.
But yeah, so he stays in the room. He's lying on the bed, and Lisbon's outside. She's getting ready to leave, and then the two restaurant owners arrive. And I don't know where they got this other woman. Was she in the restaurant?
They show her in the scene when Van Pelt slaps Rigsby and they're making their
Uh,
hole. They show another red-headed woman in that scene.
okay, and that was her because I think I remember the lady
Yeah,
you're talking about, but I thought she was older, and I think the girl that they brought back was younger with straight hair. I don't know. I'd have to go back again and look.
in the script, it points out that we linger on another redhead in that scene.
But yeah, so Jane hides, and the way that this room is laid out, there's like no door to the bedroom area, but there's like a wall that he can hide behind. But there's no place else for him to hide, right?
Right.
It's just the room and that's it. So he has to just stand there. Although while they were distracted, I kind of felt like, dude, you could have just snuck out instead of just standing there.
You could have broke out the window. I mean, you got to keep your machete handy for such situations.
I mean, when they go and get the sheet plastic and they're like putting it
Yeah.
on the bed, they're clearly distracted. I feel like he could have
Yeah.
just like tiptoed out. Instead, he's like dialing Lisbon on his phone. But so this is where they show us a flashback to how Melanie was actually killed and that she was killed in the blue van. And this is the same blue van that McAllister was standing right next to when he came to the restaurant. And this is the same blue van that drove past McAllister and Van Pelt when she was on the road. So I guess they must have kidnapped the girl pretty soon after.
Yeah. And you wonder how the timing fits for that. It's the middle of their day running the
Yeah.
restaurant.
Yeah. And it's the both of them too. So
Yeah.
maybe, I mean, I guess they must have just like, we're going to go out to lunch.
We're going to get this done one way or another. So it's attempt number 3, and we're going to do what we want.
Yeah, so Jane dials a number, and I mean, I'm assuming it's Lisbon because she comes back. But he just stands there, and then they see him, and he tries to talk his way out of the door, like you were mentioning earlier. He's like holding his phone at them, like
Yeah.
it's a weapon.
Yeah.
Like, stay back! I've got my phone. Uh, and he tries to stall by saying that they're surrounded and that they're clinically insane that they can probably get away with it. But then they start fighting, and that's when Lisbon bursts in and she shoots Malcolm dead. But this was pretty dangerous for Jane because he's standing right behind the guy when she shoots him. The bullets could have gone through him and hit him. But then yeah, Malcolm had a knife, right? And Sandra had a gun. So I feel like Lisbon put them in danger here too, because she should have probably gone for Sandra first because she had the gun. But yeah, she shoots Malcolm first and then Sandra, and Jane is really shaken. He looks at Lisbon like kind of in disbelief at how close it came, and she's trying to help. And she's trying to help the girl. But yeah, the two of them look pretty shaken up by what happened.
It says in the script that this was Lisbon's first kill on the
Mm.
job. So,
I do wonder why they cut that.
yeah.
So they show the team at Melanie's funeral. They don't go to funerals very often. I think there's only one other time where they go to a funeral.
Hmm. Yeah. And they don't, I wouldn't say they linger at the funeral.
I did find it a little weird that Van Pelt was basically talking during the service. I was like, she's religious. Shouldn't she not be talking? But yeah, she's like telling about how she can't believe that they were a couple and that they were killers. And that marriage is supposed to be a sacred, loving thing. And Jane just tells her that they were soulmates in their own way. And I thought this was a really nice segue into how Jane and Lisbon stay behind, because they're soulmates in their own way too. But we don't know that at this point, really, because he's got his quest and they're kind of adversarial with each other. They're not really partners, I don't think, at this point. At least not to me. But yeah, they stay behind, and Jane exchanges looks with Frankie, and then as they're leaving, Jane puts a comforting hand on Lisbon's shoulder. And I guess it's because she's maybe thinking about the fact that she killed two people and how the brother has to go on. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think is going through her head at this point?
I would agree. I think it's just been a really heavy ending. They had their close case and people died, and she was wrong too.
Yeah.
She was following the wrong lead.
Yeah. Okay. Cold reading. I think we already talked about this. We basically covered this. At what point does Jane crack the case?
Yeah, I think we did cover it. It's when Lisbon points out the tight timeline, and you kind of see a light bulb go off in Jane's head
Mm-hmm.
that it was a very tight window, and you had to look at the people who were there at the scene, and it had to be someone who worked at the restaurant.
Yeah. But that's why it worked so well with McAllister, because when they see him, Lisbon's like, he was there. Because they had been talking about the 20 staff at the restaurant, and those were Jane's suspects, right? Even though he thought it was the chef. But yeah, so that's why McAllister worked really well as a red herring. But then that's like basically the last we see of him on that road. We don't see them saying goodbye to him or anything. So
Right.
once he's off the table, that's it. Okay, hot reading. Karen's gonna talk about some deleted scenes from the script.
Okay, so we have a few scenes here. These first two have to do with Rigsby and Van Pelt and their budding relationship that the writers here are trying to really play up very quickly in the beginning. So when the description, when they're in their office before Lisbon calls them, it describes this as Rigsby and Van Pelt are seated at desks at opposite ends of the room doing that clerical stuff which cops have to do. The scratch of a pen and the clicking of a keyboard and the loud buzz of sexual tension. But it also says that, points out this is our first look at CBI HQ, and so we take a good look around before the action starts. But I don't think they really had time to do
Yeah, I mean,
all of that.
you can kind of see like just basically around Rigsby, and that's basically it. We don't get to see that much of the bullpen, but the
Yeah.
set didn't change, so yeah.
Yeah. I get more of a feeling that Rigsby is just bored.
Yeah, because they both jump at their phone, right?
Yeah.
They're so eager.
And he's like, "Hey, Lisbon, I'll do some stuff for you. What do you want me to do? I'll come down there." But then later, after they arrest Hector and they're all together, Lisbon tells them to go back to the office, and then she walks off with Jane. So she dismisses Rigsby and Van Pelt to go back to the office. And Jane says, "I don't get it. You won't allow sexual tension in your sacred unit, but you're leaving those two in the office with nothing to do. It only heightens the tension." And Lisbon smiles and says, "Yes, the sooner they start having sex, the better. Then one or other of them will have to transfer out. Rules." And Jane says, "Ah, clever."
Which is very different from the Lisbon we actually get in the show.
Very different.
Because she is really opposed to that. And I don't know if it's just because Van Pelt was new and like she annoyed her in the pilot or whatever. And maybe she has been annoying her like in other ways. But she seems to value them a lot more in the actual show. So,
Yeah, I would love if they had filmed this just to hear their inflection,
yeah. Yeah.
because it could be played a couple different ways.
Yeah,
I don't
because
know.
later on, she comments about Van Pelt saying that she could go far as long as she manages not to sleep with Frisbee.
Right, right. And here she's like, yeah, might as well just get it out of the way. Let them do what they need to do. But then it's like she doesn't want to know about it. And when it does
Yeah.
happen eventually in the show, she's like in
La la
complete
la 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 la
denial.
la.
Yeah, don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. The next deleted scene I thought was interesting hones in more on the revenge angle. They show Jane bringing Frankie back to his family and have Frankie give his axe to his father, like give up his revenge quest. And then Frankie goes inside and his mother breaks down, wishing that Frankie had killed her daughter's murderer. This lady is saying, I wish my 10-year-old
I know.
had
That's
killed that guy.
crazy.
Ugh.
And actually, just to be clear, these are deleted scenes from the script. We don't know if they actually filmed these because they never released these as actual scenes. I mean, it's possible that they did, but we don't know. So,
Right. And then this last one is a continuation of the seduction scene where Jane says he wouldn't seduce her over a meal. He takes her to the hotel and she's like, "What are we doing here?" Before they go inside, she's like, "Okay, what's the gag?" And Jane says, "This is what I would do if I was going to seduce you. A lonely motel and straight to the point. Teresa, let's make love." And Lisbon gives him a rock solid deadpan that takes the smile off his face.
so this is very strange to me. It doesn't read like them at all. To like, how I would have thought the meal would have been preferable to this. How is this? How is this not sophomore? It's very presumptive and uh what is a good word for it? It's not romantic. The terrace was romantic, but this is not romantic. No, I'm glad this was not this was not what they went with.
That's, I mean, you got to wonder, like, what is he just trying to get a rise out of her? I mean, what is this trying to reveal about their relationship and how they get along? So
Yeah, I don't know.
the other one is a lot more subtle.
Yeah, yeah. So, a couple of things we're going to be doing as we do this rewatch is we're going to be watching for Jismin moments, and we've already talked about the sophomoric seduction over a meal part. But we're also going to be looking at when Jane is wrong, because people say on the sub all the time, usually first time watchers, they say that it's annoying that Jane is never wrong and the team is made to look stupid. But he's actually wrong fairly often, and I've said this is what I usually say when people say that Jane is never wrong, is that Jane is often wrong. He's just really good at shifting to the next thing so that you don't realize that he was wrong. That's just part of his slick personality, right? He's a smooth talker. He convinces you that he's always right because he just moves on. He just glazes over when he's wrong. But in this one, he's wrong because he has no idea that it's both restaurant owners. I mean, Karin said that she thought that he suspected an accomplice, but he didn't know that the wife was the accomplice. It kind of seemed like he was almost buying into McAllister for a little bit too.
Yeah.
Just from the defeated way he acts after Lisbon leaves, he's just lying on the bed like, oh, how did that go wrong? You know, and she's gone to go try to save Rigsby and Van Pelt's careers, and I guess he must also just feel bad about that too, because yeah, they could potentially be in trouble.
Yeah. He definitely does not expect anyone to show up at that hotel room because
Yeah,
otherwise he would not have just been lying
lying
prone
there.
on the bed.
Yeah. All right. Favorite lines. Mine was the one with Frankie when he says, being sorry is far worse punishment than being dead. Everybody dies. Very few people ever feel truly sorry for the bad things they've done. It hurts. I really like that because he's being really open and honest with Frankie here. So he covers up his depression and his sadness with his glowing smile and his joking around and his he always looks generally happy, but he's just really sad inside. And it's because, like he said, he's really sorry. And the whole show is basically his penance, right? He's trying to make up for what he's done.
Agreed. It's a really a great quote just to get into his headspace.
Okay, what's yours?
Okay, mine is when Lisbon realizes that Cho enabled Jane to hypnotize Raquel. She says to him, "You allow him to pull that stuff again, and you'll be showing visitors around the state house in a stupid hat."
And she like clotheslines him too to stop him, right? And she like puts her
Oh,
arm
yeah.
on him.
Yep. He's about to walk away, and she's like, "Oh no, you're getting in trouble right now."
I've got something to say. This is very mom of her. Memory Palace quiz. We introduced this last week and we're going to do it again. So, what I have are 5 questions of increasing difficulty, and Karin, my co host guinea pig, is going to take them along with you.
Woohoo.
You'll have 5 whole seconds to come up with an answer. I know, so generous. All right. Question 1. Frankie brings an axe to kill Hector. What did Jane originally think he brought?
A gun.
Yeah, good job. All right. Question 2. How does Jane figure out that Melanie's boyfriend's name started with an H?
So he laid down in Melanie's room. He laid down on her bed and looked up, and there was a collage of photos in the shape of an H.
Yeah. Karin is a pro, see? Okay, question 3. We talked about this earlier in the episode, so let's see if you guys remember this. What weapon is Hector carrying as he runs away from the CBI team?
A machete.
A machete. Question 4. Why was McAllister at the restaurant the night Melanie was killed?
He was dealing with a call of someone who was drunk and didn't want to pay their bill.
Ooh, good job. Question 5. What does it say on the van that Melanie was killed in? It's number 5, so it's the hard one.
I want to say it's the name of the restaurant, but I can't remember the name of the restaurant.
It's actually not the name of the
It's
restaurant.
not.
It says Shan Creek Winery.
Okay.
Okay, I have one more bonus question then. What is the
Okay.
name of the restaurant that the killers own?
I just told you I don't remember. It's in my notes.
It's called Malcolm's at Shand Creek. And Malcolm is the name of the husband, the killer. Not bad though. You did well.
Gotta start studying for those hard ones.
I know. I can be Rufus, you know. Okay, any last thoughts about this episode? I enjoyed this one. I really liked it.
Yeah, I enjoy the rewatch on this. As I was mentioning before, it's their first standard case.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have Red John. We got to bring in Jane and Lisbon kind of working together a little bit more and seeing how Jane puzzles everything out. And yeah, I enjoy this one a lot.
It must drive her crazy, though, that she's got a showman on her team, right, who wants to dazzle everyone with his reveals.
Yep.
Okay, so that's it. Our next episode will be going over episode 3, but we hoped you enjoyed this one. If you're enjoying Rom-Com Detectives, be sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Spotify, leave us a comment on the episode and tell us how you did on this week's Memory Palace quiz. If you'd like to join additional conversations about The Mentalist, you can join the Mentalist subreddit at reddit.com/r/The Mentalist, and you can join the Mentalist Bullpen Discord server, which is linked in the sidebar. To contact me and Karin, email us at hosts@romcomdetectives.com, and you can follow us on Instagram at romcomdetectives. This episode of Rom-Com Detectives was recorded on February 27, 2025. Rom-Com Detectives Mentalist Unit is co-hosted by Krista Watanabe and Karin Lubbers and is produced by Pico's House. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.